Jack, happy holidays to you. Great to be back, and so much to talk about. And I know you had a thought, and we're both fascinated by this, right? Which is organizational changes that you need to make in order to take advantage of AI. And I know you had an article that you were interested in. Do you mind sharing your thoughts on that, and then maybe we can riff on that a little bit?
Yeah, so in organizational behavior, then there's a lot of kind of generalizations that we can infer from the science, basically, of organizational behavior, right? And we've been kind of focusing on maybe little bits like, hey, what's the cognitive load on responding to an email, right? Or writing an email with an agenda about something that is maybe like a problem solving task or something else, or what is the real kind of criteria for success, I guess, for let's say organizing a meeting, right? Like, hey, we want a meeting that is supposed to accomplish something, and how do we know who is supposed to be there? How do we know how to prepare for it? How do we know what's the optimal outcome? And then now we are putting on top of everything the AI, right? Like AI is going to be infused into, let's say, Teams software
It's
or
going to
email.
save us all, right?
Yeah, and 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 then and you have those more and more kind of intelligent, quote unquote, large language models that are kind of maybe focusing on planning. Now IBM is coming up with an advertisement that their Granite models will be trained on enterprise data. Like, so this might mean a lot of different things, right? But maybe it's not going to know all the Shakespearean writings, but it will know something about organizations, right? Like, so then the question is obviously, okay, so we have the copilots and everything else that's supposed to be helping us with running things within an enterprise. Now, do we actually know what we want? That's kind of a big question, right?
Well, I know exactly what we want, and I did see this as a I don't know if it was a video or something or other, and I know what it was. It was related to people not being able to read anymore, right? Which is a kind of a personal concern of mine because I like reading and I write, right? So if I have nobody wants to read anymore, maybe this is a case in point, right? Is I'm going to write something, we have a video, but either way, this idea of being able to focus, I think that's
Hmm.
what's really interesting because I come from creative fields where getting in, or same with coding. I mean, actually, any field where you have to do anything, it normally takes, we can each give our own examples, but I would say probably an hour of focus on a problem before you could ever even begin, to chip away at it, right? And to build something or make something, right? You need focus. Some people also call it flow, right? Like when
Hmm.
time stops and you are suddenly feeling productive or things are working your way or whatever. If you're in that spot, wonderful. What I think most organizations have done is basically outlaw that. Like if you're a middle manager, you have no ability to focus. You're supposed to context switch every few minutes, right? This is our
Hmm.
CEO leadership, right? You're just supposed to be kind of constantly poking and learning and cajoling and doing whatever they do. The most recent thing I saw was that all those people are getting laid off, right? Which, along with me getting laid off from that position, seems reasonable because they figured, like, well, you need people to do things, and then maybe you need some people to take all the money from from their efforts and spend it on stuff, right? But you don't need a middle, right? And I don't know that that's due to AI, but I think it's more due to um, virtuality. Being
Hmm.
virtual started this trend that it said, well, I guess you just don't really need to be physically sitting there for 8 hours, right? To be
Yeah.
valuable. But maybe I've taken us off topic. Do you have thoughts, or do you agree or disagree with the need for focus?
Yeah, totally. So I can see this in myself, and I kind of maybe this is my inferiority complex, but but yeah, I'm kind of exactly experiencing that. If I have multiple projects, and in one project I have several hundreds of columns in a database that I have to kind of capture in an AI agentic process so that I can retrieve stuff from those things. And then I have to quickly switch to another couple of hundred different columns for another project that is about, something else. Then obviously, that's such I'm kind of dreading that switch, right? Because I know how much stuff I have to abandon and kind of get into another kind of domain, right? And then maybe have an intelligent meetings, like kind of like one after another about, how I have to discuss my progress, and I have to kind of like maybe manage the team so that I can kind of give them tasks. So that's a very hard thing to do. So having an AI at a really high meta level that is kind of able to really kind of maybe that's what Microsoft is trying what Microsoft is trying to do with this screen capture, like a streaming the stream and the screens. Maybe there's something to it. I mean, if we kind of set aside all the privacy problems that we might have with that approach, then having an AI kind of understanding what I'm doing and maybe continuing for a little bit, or maybe preparing the meeting notes or preparing the tasks for the team, that would be kind of a huge thing. But I think we are very far away from that task being accomplished by a generative AI system.
I mean, that hope, the hope of the busy work being handled certainly seems possible, right? Because, because AI is so quick, right? I mean, to me, the fun thing about it is that to make a plan, to actually get people together to plan used to be a week-long. I mean, it's always been painful. I mean, even just doing, and this is even rare in places I've worked, doing the prioritization model, right? Like who should be working on what, and how important is this thing, and how do you assess how well that's going? Because we have an inner misunderstanding. Well, usually when you're doing creative work, you don't really know how long it'll take. That's all, right? Like if it was something where, hey, how long does it take to make some Vienna sausage hot dogs, right? Like industrial processes are pretty reliable, right? If you put the stuff in the front, you should be able to get 100 hot dogs an hour. And if you invest in this new machiner process, maybe you get 120 per hour. But these things are very linear and understandable. Whereas people's work isn't as easily understandable until now, because I do believe that somehow you could get AI to see patterns in behavior, right? And these patterns, unfortunately, I always feel are going to be misused to say, hey, most people who are happy about this say, yeah, all my work, all my 8 hours a day, I can accomplish now with AI in 20 minutes, right? That's what people are purporting is true. Now, that doesn't sound like it's true for you, and maybe it isn't, but I do think that time saving is there, and with time saving comes my hope and my personal hope is experimentation. Right? You get to do different things. Like when things aren't as costly, you can try newer things without really fearing like, oh, well, I'm never going to get my work done. And having just finished my class, still surprised how few people seem to use AI to generate their final papers. I'm surprised. They still seem like they're written by people. And to me, I'm a little disappointed in that, right? Because I'm like, well, if you really took the time to let the AI do kind of the grunt work, you could use your brain to see the bigger picture, right? You could see the things you're missing because you don't have to do the tedious work. Now, that's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, so I think it might be a little bit. Yeah, so the thing is that, okay, so let's say you are writing a paper, right, or working on a project like me, and then the outcome maybe is supposed to be kind of enhanced by the AI. So how is the enhancement supposed to look like, right? Maybe it's going to be, instead of a 5-page paper, maybe it's going to be a 50 pages of content, right? So if that's the case, or maybe in my case, maybe I will maybe produce 10 times more code, right? That can accomplish some sort of a analytical task, right, based on the database, right? So one way or another, so we have AI that can produce that. So in terms of the paper, is there going to be anybody that's going to be reading that paper, right? I mean, what is the value of this, right? There is a professor that is reviewing your work, and it's great. It's probably a lot of maybe, if the paper is great, that would be an extremely rewarding experience and learning experience for you. But then, okay, so that's pretty much it. So did we accomplish something here, right? Did we accomplish maybe is the outcome that the student now from now on, instead of being able to write 5 pages of memos, they're going to be able to write 50-page memos, right? And if those 50-page memos are supposed to go somewhere, let's say to a manager, is there a manager that is going to read anything? Or is there going to be an AI that is going to now take those 50 pages and really take advantage of that memo that is extremely thorough with all the references and stuff, and kind of improve some sort of an organizational outcome because the AI actually was able to dig into that 50 pages instead of 5 pages, right? So I guess that's kind of like a bit broader question, right?
Well, I mean, the immediate thought I had is this thing called art for art's sake, right? Like, you need to do things because they have some meaning to you, like they don't need to necessarily solve the problem or generate wealth for the company, which is what we always wonder about, right? Like, if you had no employees and you generated wealth, you'd have the perfect company. I think that's definitely your thought, and that makes sense to me, right? Like, you don't need to have people toiling away, but employment's wonderful, right? We somehow need these things, but I still think when you're doing creative work, hopefully you're already in the mode that you're doing it for your own benefit. I think sometimes students feel this, right? Like, you're doing an exercise, you're lifting weights, or right, it's something to do. Bye, hon. It's good for you to produce things. But I'm kind of with you. I've been writing and I've built, I in fact looked back to an old site where I think I diagrammed 10 years of my efforts, right? I wanted to go back in time when I built the site. So I went back 10 years and documented everything that I could think happened in my life in 10 years to build this website. I just went back to it today and I was a little impressed, because I'm like, wow, I'm kind of glad I did this. I don't think anyone ever read it, right? Because why would they? But then I started thinking, well, I've written all these other things and I've done all, does anyone, do we only do things for others to benefit from? I don't know. I honestly don't think you can, in this day and age. I think you need to do it for its own reward personally. You're curious about something. You're interested in, does this person accomplish the task you want them to do well, right? It's more of a personal, it gets back to like just relationships, right? Who do we rely upon? I rely upon you to have a perspective that I appreciate, right? And it's this reliability of other people that, maybe we go back to, rather than it being like, hey, did you get the job? Did you put in your 40 hours? I guess that's the beginning of this new book I'm writing, right? It's like, I didn't work my 40 hours this week, and therefore I'm going to be called out. And it was like, what does 40 hours have to do with anything, right? Like, it's just a convention. You could get it done in an hour, you could get it done in 80 hours. I have no idea. We don't have any idea, the bigger the company gets, about how long it takes to do things. So where does AI come into? To me, the AI is at least going to be less um, dishonest about it. That's my performance theater part of this, is that people just pretend to do things most of the time, because if you're ever seen as being idle, that is the worst crime in our society, right?
Mm.
Is to not be very busy and not seem to care. I mean, when have you ever talked to somebody who didn't say, "Oh yeah, I've got so much to do"? I'm honestly, and you just said it too, right? It's like
Mm.
it's this curse that you can never be idle, right?
Mm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the show. I think it was called Mad Men, right? And there
Hmm.
was Don Draper was the main characters, and many times when his boss was walking into Don Draper's office, he was just lying on the couch and
Hmm.
being drunk or staring at the ceiling, and then his boss was always saying, "Oh, I'm glad that you're working, right?" So, um, and that might have been the case, right? I mean, his work was creative. His work was coming
Sure.
with ideas. That's why he was there, and he was brilliant, right? There's clearly
I
portrayed as
think
a
I did
really
have a
brilliant.
couch in my office once,
Yeah.
me and my partner. So I don't think I ever lay down on it though. Now I'm feeling bad that I never did. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of definitely part of it, right? I mean, what's the outcome supposed to be like, and again, maybe coming to your paper is the outcome in the era of AI. Now talking maybe more technically and the data structures, is the outcome, let's say, supposed to be a paper, right? Maybe the outcome is supposed to be some sort of a metadata knowledge graph kind of a deal that is machine readable, but maybe not necessarily human readable. And evaluating of those things is kind of very tricky. And the process of building those things may look like, hey, you are actually not doing the work, right? I mean, it's kind of like, hey, you are using the tools are coming up with stuff, and maybe the only litmus test at the end of the day is to run another system that is using those data structures that you created, and kind of see if it is useful in any way, right?
Well, and that's why it's interesting that people with our ability to focus, our understanding of, let's just say we sort of have a good mental model of how these machines work, right? We kind of understand them to a certain extent, so that we're able to say, hey, if I can economize by doing this, or economize by doing X, Y, or Z, right? If you publish code and you can have code reviews. I think that was a big thing I saw, code reviews being done by AI, right? Like things like that uh,
Mm.
seem really interesting, right? That there are what we are able to take advantage of. But my point, my hope is that people have no ability to use computers can now use computers. That's where I'm really hoping, because the abilities that are locked up in them have not been translated into the computer world, right? Let's just hope that they all have abilities. I think they probably do, right? I know the thing that I saw recently that really threw me off was a page turner. So I went to the symphony, or not the symphony. I went to a concert at Symphony Hall, and there are three cello, cello trio, whatever they call viola. Anyway, they're sitting there or standing there playing, and then there's a pianist, and he's got a piece of sheet music in front of him, and then there's this person next to him also in a suit that's there to turn the page. Okay,
Mm.
now the thing that threw me off is that the other people didn't have this, right? They had iPads or something, right? They had
Mm.
this device that did this for them, and the whole time I really had a hard time, like, just not focusing on this. Do you see what I mean? Like, why do you have a whole job where your job is to turn a page, and that isn't non-skilled, right? Because
Mm.
the person has to be able to read music and know where you're at or whatever. But the page turning ability So the only thing I could imagine is that the other people were using little foot pedals, I guess. I mean, I was thinking that the music could probably tell where you are now, right? And someone must have figured out how to make the pages turn. Either way, sorry, Jack, can you unpack this for me? Do you see my dilemma and why that's relevant to our conversation? Because it seems to be.
Totally. Yeah,
like
actually,
how many page turners do we have in business?
I am a little bit of a musician, right? And I can actually understand this, that, there is a, if let's say the pianist was probably very uncomfortable with the cognitive load of playing piano and then having a pedal. I'm assuming that he must have known that, there is tools, but, pushing the pedal in the right moment, so that the page switches on iPad is actually a skill that you have to train.
I think you're right, and you're also doing your sustains and whatever. So I figured the only, but then I was like, how many piano players do we have? Because once he left, which he did, the quartet is perfectly able to make music. You know what I mean? Like this piano, the piano parts are fine. Again, I'm not going to critique the pieces, but actually I kind of like the trio better. But the weirdest thing was, again, this sort of physicality of like, well, meetings, you talked about it, right? Like, what are these things for? Why do they take an hour? Why do they take a half hour? I think everyone in business should know this now, that you have no idea how long they should take, right? But yet magically they always seem to take the amount of time allotted.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that, should we use this metaphorically? I mean, that's a page turner thing, right? Like there's no ability to run a meeting because you don't know how long they should take. And therefore, all of them are suspect. There you go, Jack. We've just outlawed meetings once again. Right? Wow. Now, collaboration, I remember just sitting next to people because I was taught how to do Scrum, and you sit in the same room, and whenever you wanted to interject or talk to somebody, you just did, right? You never had a meeting. In fact, the whole Scrum framework was based on never having meetings outside of certain times, and all of them were times when you would normally goof off anyway, right? Mondays at the beginning of a sprint, Fridays were all, you see what I mean? They were always Fridays were always goof off, get to know each other days, and you would have some sort of like a grooming session or something, just basically because the minute you have a meeting, you're not going to get anything else done. And I've seen that in my own team, whereas if you have a half-hour meeting, you're going to get nothing done. It's that focus thing, right? I don't want to get into a focus state and then have to stop.
Yeah.
But that means I think people are not training themselves, and that's what this thing that was so impactful. You have to train yourself to focus. That's why books are so interesting, because they're not like watching TV. You have to learn to focus in order to read the book.
Yeah.
And if you have never done that before, it's just practice, right? It's like anything. I don't know how to run a marathon, but I'm certainly not going to be able to do so if I don't practice. You're not going to be able to focus if you don't consistently practice focus. And if our businesses are built on no focus time allowed, right? You're supposed to be productive all the time or something, where I guess that's fine. I don't know. As I said, maybe there's something I'm missing, but I don't know that people, even people I think are really talented, I think they still get very little done.
Well, yeah, either that, right? Or you have, people like Elon Musk, and he will say that he is working more than 100 hours a week, right? And maybe he is that genius level that can really multitask and doesn't have any problem with the cognitive load, being, able to kind of juggle, really kind of, very separate topics that are really not intersecting too much, and having a lot of things done and kind of progressing through his day, with a feeling that he's accomplishing things, right? So maybe CIOs and top level managers and CEOs and all those guys, they really can do that, right? And then there's guys maybe like in the trenches, like myself, for example, where I'm feeling like I'm suboptimal if I have to divide my attention and switch, let's say, an hour doing this, an hour of doing that, and I feel like if I have like a couple of days maybe devoted to a problem, then I accomplish a lot more.
I think you'd be a fan of Scrum because honestly, well, for one, the job of Musk, I guess, if I could talk about him, isn't to do work. You know what I mean? It's like if he can be productive, or like you said, if he works for 100 hours, that feels disingenuous because your job isn't at that level to get job stuff done. He's got $300 billion, hire somebody. If you cannot delegate, right, or if you can't basically build a culture, that's supposed to be your job the higher you go, right? You're supposed to make it so people understand how to get along, right? You're almost you're the preacher in front of this is how you need to behave. That's your job, I think, at that level, which doesn't have to be time consuming, right? And then the other thing you do is probably get other businesses on your side, right? Like network, like I guess, right? You go to those Soros things or whatever those things we hear about that you have to be a billionaire to go to. You go to TED Talks. How's that, right? You're supposed to be there to infuse culture into this group of people that you've hired to get stuff done. But if you're doing all the work, you can never scale. That's well, there you go. We've just given our predictions on the Trump presidency because I don't think he could ever get anything done because it takes too long. It's too hard.
Well, so I think I have to disagree with you, right? On this. So I think Elon has two very important jobs, right? I think maybe 10-20% is to invent, right? So he has to come up with an idea that kind of has a good chance of success, like maybe like a new rocket engine, or whatever, or new type of battery. So he looks at research and he reads, okay, so we're gonna devote time and resources to actually do things this way, right? So that's maybe 20% of his time, and then maybe I think 80% of his time is probably optimizing stuff that is already running. Like for example, in manufacturing, he's optimizing, Tesla manufacturing process, right? So his decisions are probably like, okay, so do I put like a robotic process that is, putting an engine in the car, right? Or an electric motor in the car, or do I do it with people, right? Like I'm simplifying, right? But this is probably his decisions that he has to make, and he knows what's going to be the cost benefit of doing this robotically, and what's going to be the cost benefit of doing this, with people, right? And I think so his decisions are kind of like impactful, right? Like it would be easy.
I'm going to go back. For one, I don't think he's ever invented anything. So let's put it, this is my opinion. I think number two is what is absolutely true. Prioritization is the only job, right? That is the only job, whether at any level that you're at. I just think the higher up you get, your prioritizations have to be even clearer. And I just read about Mr. Evil himself, Jack Welch, right? Even he thought that it was kind of dumb to maximize shareholder value, right? That was a thing that he kind of invented, that our stock should keep going up. That is the job of a CEO, right? We need to continually build value of this asset in order to get more people, etc. But I think that's the point, right? It's if you are the best and the brightest, if you're Apple or Tesla or whatever, I don't know if people want to go work for him, but they know that they're A, going to get a challenge, B, they're going to be in an environment where they can use these specialized skills that they have, and C, that they're going to find the prioritization to be meaningful from an executive level. And personally, I'm sketchy on that one. I think my leadership that I've experienced is not very good at making decisions. Not really. I think that they're pretty good at making making the board happy. How's that? I guess that's all they're really good at, that they keep their job.
Mm.
So, and in fact, one of the leaders I was closest to, he just ended up resigning because, like, I did my thing and we're fine. I didn't run the company into the ground, but I don't really enjoy doing it. So, and I'm rich, which is the biggest problem now, right? With Musk, like once you have $400 billion, like you said, I'm not gonna. He's way too old to invent anything. You know what I mean? Like that's a young person's. I think, as I said, I think that, I don't want to become across as too contradictory, but I do think that there's something here. I think we've got some interesting insights into this, because certainly what people imagine people do is different from what reality is. And to me, looking at you, I see you as being, the most competent and the most insightful person being able to do these amazing things, right? Whereas you see yourself as like, well, I see most of my time as, again, you see yourself very differently, right? My only hope is that AI allows us to have some sort of a neutral ground to assess things, right? If you're assessing, hey, should we continue with Project X? That to me is where, yes, I'm spending most of my time explaining Project X, where Project X is going, where I would like it to go, where my leadership is important, right? Like where that should happen to someone higher up, so that then when there's the axe comes, they're like, well, we need to keep the people that are working on Project X still here. Right. Or whatever, those are priorities too, right? We have a whole division that's right now, I would imagine customer service is a really strange world, right? Because that's definitely being impacted by AI. I think it's definitely being improved by AI, because you can train these things, but that doesn't mean you can just get rid of it, So yeah, those decisions about how these affect higher ups, and as the middle leaves, or becomes individual practitioners, we'll start to see something happening. I don't know. They said that somehow there was 9 layers of management. Maybe it was IBM. I can't remember. It's another big company, right? And now there's 5. And nobody noticed a difference. See what I mean? That's what's interesting.
Yeah.
But that being said, I hope we haven't gone too long on this, but it is one of my favorite topics. Anyway.
Oh yeah. I think it was certainly, I think we should continue maybe with some frameworks. Like I just maybe yesterday I read something about game theory and Nash equilibrium being applied, in AI systems, right? So kind of like a really mathematical and natural, I would say, way to optimize, because game theory captures natural processes, right? Like kind of like in some situations, the system will always choose most kind of like a balanced position, whether it's winning or losing, or whether it's kind of whatever the metrics might be. So maybe we can kind of continue this with some frameworks that we can kind of quote.
Absolutely. And in terms of invention, I think that is the realm of the young. But guess what? Philosophy is definitely for our age group, right? Philosophers come into their own right now, right? What is the meaning of things? Why do we do things? So let's do that next time, and for sure. And if this is our last before, I think we'll get another in for the holiday break. Why not, right?
Oh yeah, totally.
Okay, all right. Well, cheers. Always,
thank you,
always good.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.